I don't think we ever
We can
struggle
waffle.
not to fill the void.
Me and you can waffle for days, mate. We're sorted. Fundamentally, okay. George, some news came out from Fabrizio Romano on his behind a paywall, whatever it is, thing he does, that Arsenal are, let me get the exact quotes up, that Arsenal are in pole position to sign Jorrel Hato from Ajax. We had links to him in January, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
To those who don't know Jorrel Hato, you do, because you are a nerd.
Or a nerd.
Absolute nerd. Like, let's be honest, fundamentally. Talk us through the profile of Jorrel Hato. Who is this bloke who was Ajax captain at 17? Am I correct in saying?
Incredible. Look, he's a unique player. I think he's a very rare type of profile. He strikes me as a technical Nathan Ake. And so he's definitely somebody that's in that left center back / left back mold, who is tall for a fullback, but short for a center back in that mold. He's definitely somebody that thrives in those wider channels, but also, by the way, has incredible central center back versatility because he is so technical with receiving the ball. He really has no angle bias in terms of how he's going to receive. In terms of his weak foot usage, he's also not afraid to use it. I don't think it's something that he's ambipedal. So you're not going to look at somebody that you question what foot he is. He's very clearly left-footed. But I think he's just an absolute freak in terms of his ability to be calm under pressure in the first phase. The reason why, by the way, I rate Nathan Ake so brilliantly is because I don't think that there's a 1v1 defender in wide spaces that really rivals him in the left in the world. I think there's very, very few people until now, exactly. But Jorrel Hato has just this incredible agility to meet markers. Like, what makes Nathan Ake so special, by the way, in terms of how he approaches 1v1s? He's just a physical freak that can outrun and jockey you in person. You could be Vinicius Jr. and he's able to jockey you in the same speed that somebody's straight line running. That's a physical freak aspect that, by the way, Jorrel Hato carries. He's got that physical ability to jockey a run brilliantly. And he's also so quick across the ground. He really is a top tackler as well. I think that when he goes into challenges and he does go to ground, he always wins it. He's somebody that values and really relishes that part of the game as well. Much in the same way that Gabriel, you could say, is defender first. I think Jorrel Hato, despite growing up in the Ajax community, is one of those rare people that goes duels first. And in fact, there's that famous quote of Jorrel Hato when it came out with the links that talked about how important the duels are to him. I think he's somebody that cares about that aspect of the game. To move on to some of the exciting points, I think in possession, I called him a more technical Nathan Ake. Now, some people might ask me, is that really a difficult thing to do? Nathan Ake isn't this wonderfully technical player. No, it isn't, but it's very rare for somebody to be that complete in a defensive fullback and marry it with a brilliant technical ability that on its own you would marvel at. And it's that calmness that he portrays when receiving. He's never rushed. He's never hurried. You can have 2 to 3 players and he constantly makes the right decision. And this is exemplified in kind of the way that he's been a captain at so young. It's because he's so composed in these areas of the game that you're sitting there wondering and asking yourself, how is a 17-year-old able to guide the buildup and be the main perpetrator? He can really be a thrust, much in the same way that Gvardiol is able to be kind of that in-possession thrust for City. Jorrel Hato has that. Now, the thing that he differs from a Gvardiol in that sense is I think that he's a lot quicker on the ground, and I think he's more intense in the duels. He's a lighter frame as well. Gvardiol's more sturdy as a player, so I think he works to hold off challenges a bit more. Jorrel Hato won't do that. He will meet you, and much like Nathan Ake, he will try to steal the ball off you and then pass it off to somebody else. But with Jorrel Hato, what he's able to do brilliantly is he can actually receive wide and underlap to a brilliant potential. And I think his ability to do that inside and underlap from wide positions is something that we're going to really see sparkle for Arsenal. Things to improve on, because it can't be all positive. I think in terms of his profile, when he does get into the middle third or the final third, he loses his head a bit. He's absolutely somebody that you could see has been a defender all his life. And so when he does get to those points, some of the decision making in terms of where he's passing the ball can seem hurried. It can seem sometimes that he does carry a little bit more adventure in his dribble. He should really release it sooner, but he backs his ability so much. And to be fair, he is brilliant, but you don't get the amount of space that you're going to get in the Eredivisie, so he can't travel 60 yards continuously. But he is somebody that I think when he gets into those tight spaces in the final third, he does need somebody more cute to take over. He is somebody that's going to be a water carrier that will brilliantly get you from deep to the middle third or the final third. And then lastly, when he's in the final third, I think he can work on his variety of crosses from both half space areas, but also his delivery of a final ball. I think when he is going to be in this Arsenal team, you've got to have a little bit more potency in the final third. And I think he's got brilliant athletic potential because, again, he can underlap. But I think he's got, and hasn't shown this yet, but he's got huge running power. So there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to overlap. But he just isn't asked to do that for Ajax. So I don't think we've been able to see that sample. But this is just me projecting and putting my coaching hat on. You've got the athletic capability. I need to see you have that variety to your game.
Such a nerd. I love it. Okay, so when I've seen Hato, and I haven't watched him to the extent you have, but when I've seen him, what I've been really impressed with is I think a lot of young players, when they get the ball, they want to get out their feet as soon as possible. And there's not necessarily nerves, but there's a level of you can see that the tempo hasn't quite settled. When I watch him, I think he's so secure in his technical level. You can see he just waits for the bait and then jumps it, and then you can create the space in behind. That's something I'm so impressed with when I watch him. How he times the press and the pass is so impressive. Ajax captain at 17. I think says all you need to know about the sort of the character, and obviously we'll learn sort of more about that as time goes on. In terms of the squad building from an Arsenal perspective, in your view, is this the Zinchenko replacement? Is this the Zinchenko supplement? Is this the end of Jakub Kiwior? Is this the end of Mikel Arteta? Is this the end of the days of Aquarius? Not the lyrics.
Look, I don't want to kill a man while he's proverbially down, but he hasn't been renewed, and he's got 2 years left. And we know the defensive issues, and we know that we value what he can bring on in possession, but we just sit there and we say it's unacceptable to be that flawed and targeted. And
you can say his name.
It is Zinchenko. I do think, like, in terms of profile wise, he's definitely not an overlapping type of fullback that carries that huge willingness to be an arriver. The weird thing is, mate, he's got incredible running power. Like, when you analyze his game, a lot of it is in these underlaps, but if you just took the skill, there's no reason that he can't carry the same ground running power on the overlap. It's just he's not asked to do it for Ajax. So I don't think it's a capability issue, but he's definitely not that Balde type. He's not Alphonso Davies that is going to arrive into space and really deliver a potent cross. That's not his game. He is somebody that wants to draw and press bait the contact and then carry you through midfield. And in terms of left back options, mate, Zinchenko is really the only one that we've got who, again, hasn't been renewed. And so a lot of what makes Jorrel special too, by the way, is he's a press baiter, mate. And his main thing is carrying you from your build-up area into the middle third. Who is the one person that you would say that superpower is in the squad? It's Zinchenko. And so I think Kiwior actually has the benefit of the doubt because he's a little bit more, for me, in the Laporte mold. And he's not necessarily ever been a wide fullback. He's never been that type of profile. He's always been somebody that has the potential to maybe be a central center back or a Gabriel replacement at center back. So he might be a little safe, but also might not. There's been links, right? And you can't deny that Jorrel Hato is both a left center back and left back hybrid. So in that sense, I think Kiwior would raise an eye, but really if I'm Zinchenko, I'm actually more worried because I think his best superpowers marry that play style a little bit more.
Yep.
But I have a question for you. Does this mean a certain other profile stays? Like, I mean, if you've got now Zinchenko and Jorrel Hato, and you've got Tavares and Kieran Tierney, who are both overlapping types, I can't see a scenario that Arsenal lose 3 left backs in a summer. Like, it's far too much change for me. And if they did, maybe I'll hold my hands up, and Arsenal are more ruthless than I think. But I think one stays. And I have a really unpopular opinion.
No.
Maybe one of those unpopular overlapping profiles stays for pure variety and outlast the
Yeah.
ones that he was kicked out for.
This is the thing. So Arsenal have been speaking about a sort of left-sided defender for a while. I think Gunner Blog said something for a little while, and I've got it. I kind of understand to some degree. Maybe this season that's something we've maybe looked at. But first and foremost, we haven't seen Jorrel Timber in an Arsenal shirt all season. So
Yeah.
that's kind of been my main thing of kind of like people saying, well, we need a left back. It's like, well, we literally have one waiting. So we had to wait and see how that all develops. Hato, I think they're different players, but Hato, they're not chalk and cheese. We're not signing, as you say, a Balde or a Davies. This is someone who can press bait and build up in a certain way, obviously both from Ajax and have that sort of technical groundwork in them. So it feels to me like layering on top a little bit. So the sort of the overlap question mark, and I guess this comes into the question we maybe wanted to finish on of the dynamics on the left hand side. We know, and we actually get quite a few comments on the Cannonpod about like we talk too much about the left hand side and Martinelli or whatever, but we all know that the left hand side has to be addressed at some point. The dynamics that we have on the right hand side are so clean and clear. The left hand side is a little bit more up for debate, and that's kind of fine. And I do feel the kind of overlapping profile, or let's call it the overlap. Let's not the show, but the overlap in our team, and especially if we think, as you mentioned before, that you think we're going to play with 6 lanes of attack as well. We have to start questioning where that comes from. It doesn't sound like if we get Jorrel Hato, that's what we're signing him for. So I then start to go, okay, so where does if we want that overlap in our final third, forgetting profiles for a minute, well, firstly, do we want that overlap as a question mark? Secondly, how do we get there? Is it the central midfield player who we sign, potentially, who becomes a sort of the player who drifts out wide in a Xhaka way? Are we asking our superstar forward, let's say, is it definitely going to be on a sort of left-hand side? Is that the person who remains wide and makes those, again, dynamic runs from deep? I'm not sure, in a sort of white way. It doesn't quite fit in my head. Or are we going to be asking another fullback to stay in a Tavares and a Tierney to maybe question, okay, in 5 to 10 games this season, can you provide us something different? How do you see that all shaping up? I guess first and foremost, do you think it's something we even need, that dynamic run on the left? Because I do.
I definitely want the variety of profile. I'm definitely somebody that, I hate being predictable. And part of the problem is Zinchenko is. I think that's the reason why our eyes are there. At least with Kivior, I find that there is a little bit more versatility. I can say central center back. I've seen that. I like that. You have good sample there. It's not your best position, but you can do it. Left center back with Gabriel is obviously your best position. You've got options there. Can Zinchenko do anything else other than be an inverted left back? Now, there's been a lot of shouts for having him in midfield as a left 8, which I really push back on in terms of the out of possession ability and the work. And I think that people are projecting their international sample onto an Arsenal team that values second balls very differently. So I question that. But Zinchenko is a very specific profile. And I think that this overlap, by the way, you could argue, is another specific mold. Because if Kieran Tierney's not playing or Tavares, or insert your favorite, Alphonso Davies, whoever it is, that overlapper from deep areas, if he's not doing that, he's got to be able to contribute in other things. For example, Ben White does that brilliantly. He's not just an overlapper. So I think we're looking to acquire profile types. I think it makes sense not to go into a season where you don't have that variety on both sides, both an overlap and an underlap. I think it makes total sense to always have the options. But I think it's also much more rare to find your inverted left back that you love than an overlapper. I think that there are tons of players out there that provide an overlap, and it's not particularly something that is as technical and mental as the underlap is.
Yep.
So that's why I think you prioritize buying that profile when he's available and making sure teams don't get them. I mean, City paid how much they did for Gvardiol to get that. I think Arsenal are going to do a similar thing to an 18, 17-year-old so that other people don't get him.
I like the idea of the sort of the completion of the arsenal of this, in the sense that you get, I think we now probably have underlaps and overlaps enough on sort of the right hand side, but from various positions. If I said to you, we've got a reliable overlapper from deep on the left now, how are you predicting that happens? If I had to put your cards on the table.
On the table, I mean, I've said it. I think that Urian Timber is somebody that we do look at in midfield a little bit more.
You
The
think he can
way,
do that?
yeah, I think that he can evolve into something that's a lot more middle third based, and his movement is brilliant. He just understands space so brilliantly. The one thing with Jorrel Hato that you do have to make a bookmark for, his middle third to final third entry is a problem. Timber never had that. Timber was always brilliant at that, actually. So what you're buying in Jorrel Hato, you have to understand, is definitely a back six player. I think Urian Timber has carried flexibility in terms of being back six or front five. But Jorrel Hato is not that type of player for me, and his most development areas are actually in impacting the final third, which again, you don't need as a defender first. Like, I'm not sitting there asking you to be Urian Timber constantly, but because he's so specific in that, I do think that you're going to get a mover that has to do it. Because if it's not Martinelli, I think Mikel likes the idea of a forward that is wide, at
Yes.
least one in his system. And Bukayo Saka is always somebody that's going to be more midfielder-y than his winger counterpart, always. He's got more 10 capabilities, more thinking capabilities. So the likelihood is, I doubt Saka is removed. Shocking analysis.
I think that's a decent shout. Yep.
So that's why I think that the left wing is most likely going to be, whether we buy or whether we keep Martinelli there, is going to be the alternative profile that's more ISO based, quote end quote. And so you're going to ask your midfielder or your striker to carry that overlap. So if it's going to continue to be Havertz, it's got to be the midfielder. If we buy the midfielder, you can afford the striker to not overlap. So it's got to come from somewhere.
Yep.
If I was to get off the fence, and Jorrel Hato won't give you it from left back, so you can X off fullback in that question. We can still buy striker and central midfielder.
Nuno Tavares. We're keeping Cedric. One more year. Well, it was a beautiful little nerd-tastic treat for us. If you want more analysis of Arsenal Football Club and all of the beautiful goings on, you can check us out on patreon.com/thecannonpod. Have a 7-day free trial and check out all our extra stuff. And you can also find us on YouTube. Sign up as a YouTube member by pressing join below. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Come on, you Gunners. Jorrel Hato. We need to think of a chant. Bye-bye.